Om. Hello friends, this is Luke with the Yoga School, and I'm going to be addressing a question that's super common, which is what to do if you're a beginner and you don't know where to start. So first things first, my advice on this, which I think is good, is recognize the consumer aspect of yoga and the tendency to focus on what style of yoga you're doing, and recognize that that's probably not as important, because really what you're trying to do is support yourself and your practice. And so the first thing I would recommend is that you set aside a certain amount of time and acknowledge what your time constraints are. So in other words, it doesn't do any good to set expectations for yourself and just make your life harder. You probably have enough going on. If there's something in your life that is unhealthy and you're looking to replace it with yoga, that's a pretty good move. So just say, okay, well, I spend this much time at happy hour a week, and what I'm going to do is one day a week, I'm not going to go to happy hour. I'm going to practice yoga, or whatever it is. Maybe I'm not saying there's anything wrong with happy hour, but excess of happy hour can be a problem. But generally speaking, you got to start with what you have available, and then create some space. Okay, so what are you creating space for? So the first move is that if you already have a spiritual practice, a meditation practice, a prayer practice, ask yourself, do I want to get back into that? Or do I want yoga to be a part of that? Or I don't trust yoga. I don't want that to be anything about my spiritual practice. Make that distinction for yourself. So for me, my yoga practice is kind of linked to my spiritual practice. And so if that's not the case, then identify what goals you want through yoga. Yoga is very holistic, so it has a lot of avenues that you can take. Are you looking to do just asana, which is just yoga poses for your health and for just long life and energy and those kind of things? Or is this something where you're really going to tie it on and take it to the limit and question your existence and the nature of the universe and stuff like that through your practice, or connected to your practice? Or one that I think is really common is that hey, I got a religion, I'm a Christian, I go to church and I love God, but I want to take care of my body in a way that's maybe not as brutal or primitive as just going and lifting weights or something like that. You're kind of gonna want to do something that kind of feeds your soul as well as your body. So set up for yourself what you want out of it, even if you're not certain. Just ask yourself, do you want to be connected to your spiritual practice or not? So then you set aside the time for your practice and the space for your practice. So a literal space in your home. If you don't have that, you're gonna at least have to have an awareness of where you're going to practice. So for years, I was a professional backcountry guide, and so I practiced in a different place outdoors every day. That's really not easy to do. I advise, that's really hard to do in the beginning. It's best in the beginning. It's easiest if you have a set place to go. That's why yoga studios make so much money on those beginner 10 class packs and stuff like that, because people like that structure. And when you're new to it, you need structure. So I advise you to set that up and kind of stick to it. And if you adapt it mindfully. Maybe have a journal. I like a little Moleskine book, notebook, or something that you can keep track and just say I practiced here, or I like practicing here, or I want to practice here. I want to practice on the dock by the lake, or I want to practice in my living room or the kitchen, or wherever it's going to be. Make sure that it's somewhat defined. Okay. Most people have a yoga mat. You don't have to have a yoga mat, but order one. Just order some, it doesn't even matter, a mat that's big enough for you. And when you roll the mat out, it's not so much that you need the mat to prevent your feet from sliding. At this point, really what that's about is boundaries and cutting away space and saying, this is dedicated to my practice. So you've set aside time and space, which are what this phenomenal realm are made of. So when you do that, you are acknowledging to the deeper parts of your consciousness that you're setting that space aside for something. So as I mentioned before, kind of know what that is consciously. And then when you step onto that mat, there's an incredible power that comes from acknowledging hey, I'm coming here and I'm asking to be healed, or I'm asking to be improved through this practice, which we're calling yoga or asana or pranayama or whatever you're doing, but just generally say it's yoga. So that in of itself is the start of a yoga practice. So that happens, the what style you practice when you're on your mat or whatever, or veganism or whatever else you're going to do with your life that you think is a part of yoga, is really secondary from creating space. So once you've created space in yoga and you're ready to move forward, most people just want to be like, okay, well, what do I do on my mat? Okay, so I'll tell you. If you need structure, I recommend that you get a book and or a teacher. If it's me, that's great. What I'll do is prescribe postures each week, and then you can progress. Typically, I would recommend that if you get one book, that it's Light on Yoga by BKS Iyengar, and that's not a book to read. It was written a long, long time ago. It's just a really good encyclopedia of yoga postures. And so it helps someone like me to be able to say, okay, this week we're going to do Tadasana, Trikonasana, Dandasana, or Paschimottanasana, and you can just go and reference that on your own. And so I think Light on Yoga is a really good first book. I think it's like $15 on Amazon. I would recommend that. There's several other books depending on like what kind of practice you want. And then you can go to classes either with me or with somebody else, and you can start to develop a personal practice that involves input from outside sources. It can be challenging to keep that cohesive in the beginning if you have too many different sources that are kind of wildly different, and they do tend to be, because yoga tends to attract creative people, and so there does tend to be like kind of branching, no pun intended, like everybody's like really diverse in the way that they teach, because teachers tend to teach like in a way that's representative of their own experience and beliefs. So what I would advise is that you don't beat yourself up about which teacher you choose. You know, if you practice with me, just keep it simple, like get a book, come to like a weekly meeting or come to classes when you can, but make sure that you honor that personal space and keep track of what postures that you're doing. If you need 3 to get started on your own, if you don't want to come to class, you don't have money, the 3 that I would give you are Tadasana, Trikonasana, and Dandasana. So those are mountain pose, triangle pose, and staff pose, or some people call it stick pose. So those are the 3 that I would do first. You can do them at any length. You could do them for 10 seconds or 5 minutes. It doesn't matter to me. The important thing is that you get on your mat, you do a little bit of yoga, you keep that space sacred for yourself, and yeah, you just work on it continually. So last thing I'll say, when it comes to asana, a lot of times people that are new to it, they're like on their mat, and especially if you're in your kitchen or something, you're like, what am I doing? Remember this, you're breathing first and foremost. There's no better way to get connected to the meditative state of mind and to the reality of what's going on in your existence than just listening to your breath. You don't have to change it, manipulate it, do anything fancy, just breathe. And the second thing is your alignment, which is good. Like if you have a book, like try to have alignment, but don't get obsessed with it. And then your eye gazing. So like as you're practicing, like try to keep your eyes like fairly fixed on something. Try not to like be doing yoga and in your kitchen and being like this, because the next thing you know, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I'm running out of bread. And like, I didn't know I have nutmeg. What do I even use that for? So make sure that your eyes are focused. That's a part of pratyahara, which is sense withdrawal. So that's my advice. Those 3 postures, get yourself some space. Come to class if you can, but you owe it to yourself to create space in your life for your practice.